Chapter 6. Paradise. With a squeaky noise, the big doors started opening. The kids could hardly contain their excitement, but Uncle Louis insisted they stay calm. The tunnel ramp was only big enough for 2 people to walk side by side. It was dark to begin with, as there were only tiny lights along the floor to guide their way. The ramp sloped steeply upwards, and at the top, bright rays of light shone through. Uncle Louis led the children, breathing heavily as he tramped upward. Holding hands, Amy and Georgia giggled nervously. Small Charlie and timid, shy Milan were right behind them. Charlie started singing the new song, and soon most of the kids were singing Amy's song all the way up the tunnel. When they reached the top of the ramp, they could see lots of bright green straight ahead through the open doors. Everyone walked quickly toward the shining light. As much as Amy had been dreaming about paradise, nothing had prepared her for how beautiful it truly was. Once she got to the entrance, she stopped walking and stared open-mouthed in absolute astonishment. All the eager children behind her pushed her forward into the orchards. Even Rosa had a look of elation on her face. Amy found a spot away from everyone else, and with a rapturous look, she stretched her arms out and soaked in the beauty. She could see the bay, as they here called it. Light sparkled on the calm blue surface. A few brown speckled ducks were floating on top. One suddenly went headfirst into the water and waved its little webbed feet in the air. For one anxious moment, Amy thought it was drowning. But then all the others did the same thing, and the first duck bobbed back up with something in its beak. Ponce, Damien, Lima, and Franz had been dreaming about the water. They tore off their new vests and shirts and went dashing down to the lake. Uncle Louis followed them anxiously, repeating his warnings. There was no school scheduled for the first day in the New World. However, within a few minutes, it became obvious that swimming lessons had to start right away. Although Uncle Louis had never swum himself, the numerous YouTube videos he'd watched had given him a general idea of what to do. Plunging into the water with the boys, Uncle Louis tried to teach them how to float, while he experimented himself. It was a brand new adventure for them all. Wiry Ponce didn't want to listen and nearly drowned in the first few minutes. Damien pulled him out just in time. Amy wasn't sure about swimming. Seeing Ponce nearly drown and Uncle Louis struggling to keep his head above water, she decided it looked rather dangerous. She would rather explore. Turning her attention to the green field in front of her, Amy was quite proud that she knew what it was. "This is grass," she said out loud. "I know," Georgia laughed. Uncle Louis had shown them a picture book about children going to a farm. Looking up, Amy saw the cow and sheep were eating the grass, just like they did in the farm book. She reached down and tried some, but she wasn't impressed. She spat it out. Georgia and Venitha giggled. "You're not a cow," they teased. Amy made a face and twirled around in the field, singing, "I'm not a cow, I'm so glad to be me." Behind the field, the hills rose up, lined with trees, lots of pretty green trees. 2 colorful birds with bright blue, green, and red feathers flew through the air effortlessly, narrowly missing Amy's head. Amazed, she watched them flap their little wings and glide up and down. "How do they do that?" she marveled out loud. Flapping her arms wildly, she ran forward, even though Uncle Louis had told her that only birds and insects could fly. "Oh, how I would love to soar all around like that," she sighed happily. The birds were soon out of sight, heading toward the rock cliff which stood above the hills on either side. It had a big plateau on top. "Maybe I can climb up there," Amy thought, feeling this would be the second best to flying. In the distance, she spotted the shapes of 2 deer standing on the cliff. Startled by all the noise the children were making, they suddenly turned and ran off. "Oh, I hope I can make friends with them," Amy said. All around her were trees loaded with colorful fruit. Seeing the gardens filled with many flowers like those Uncle Louis had tried to draw for them in the nursery, Venitha rushed to examine them more closely. She discovered they were so much prettier than his drawings, and the roses smelled wonderful. "Oh, I love them. I want to pick them. I want to smell them," she called out. Amy rushed over to admire the colorful flowers with her friend. Charlie, Nancy, and a lot of the girls followed close behind her, laughing and shouting, rolling in the grass, picking the flowers, and touching every new thing. They were all so happy to be in the New World. Coming to the edge of the garden, the girls looked back to see that Zahir, Vahid, and Milan were testing the fruit in the orchard. The sunshine gleamed on the boys. "Look how white Milan and Vahid are compared to Zahir," Georgia marveled out loud. She looked down at her own skin. "And I'm white, too." Comparing arms, Amy decided she was golden. Santa clapped her hands and swayed her hips from side to side. "And I'm dark brown," she exulted. Vinitha laughed. "I'm right in between." "I love all the different colors that we are," Amy exclaimed. Together, Amy, Vinitha, Nancy, Santa, and Charlie explored the fields. They tried to catch the beautiful butterflies. They discovered 2 friendly puppies and a mischievous kitten in the meadow. Even a few sweet rabbits peeked out of the grass. Charlie fell in love with the small brown puppy with a white stripe down her muzzle. He picked her up and cuddled her. The puppy licked Charlie's round face and even his brown hair. He laughed out loud. "I'm calling her Maxie," he told the girls. "She's cute like you," Santa smiled. With a look of surprise, Charlie laughed again. "What do you mean?" "You're both small and you have cute faces," Santa teased. "It's a compliment," Amy assured him. "Okay," Charlie shrugged, rolling his eyes. "We're both cute," he told Maxie. Nancy picked up the little orange-striped kitten hiding in the grass. "This will be Ripple then," she said happily. Uncle Louis had read them a story about a puppy called Maxie and a kitten called Ripple. Unused to contact, the kitten hissed and stuck out her claws. "She's not so friendly," Nancy observed. For a minute she tried to keep Ripple in her arms, but the scratches deterred her from continuing. She let Ripple jump down and watched her run up the tree with the bright red fruit. "I'm going to make you like me," she promised the kitten. The other puppies saw Zahir and his friends eating the fruit and went bounding over to them. "A puppy!" Zahir called out eagerly. Kneeling down, he opened his arms wide and wrapped them around the wriggling golden pup. "Oh, I want him," he said. Charlie held up his puppy. "I called this one Maxie," he said. "What are you going to call yours?" Lifting the big puppy off the ground, Zahir was surprised that the dog wouldn't stop licking his face. He conferred with Vahid and Milan about names. Amy could hear them suggest Flicker? Goldie? "Let's just make something up," Zahir said at last. "Let's call him Freddo." His friends laughed, but they didn't disagree. "We're going to call him Freddo," Zahir announced to the girls, lowering his puppy to the ground. He and the boys took off for the lake with Freddo right at their heels. Amy had noticed the fruit the boys were sampling. "Look at those pretty red things," she said. "Let's try them." Picking some for herself and her friends, they all tried them and were enthralled. "I think there are pears," Nancy remarked. "Or was it lemons? Do you remember reading that book on fruit?" The red balls were sweet, juicy, and crunchy. "I think they are apples," Santa piped up. "Whatever they are, this is so much better than grass, or even Wonder Drink," Amy exclaimed. Santa did a little wriggling dance of delight. "I love them," she cheered. They all agreed. Vinitha looked up to see that Rosa, Tina, and Yuyan were climbing the hill nearby, and she dashed off to catch up with her friends. "Let's climb the highest hill," Charlie suggested excitedly, looking in the opposite direction and seeing there was already someone else standing on top. It took at least 10 minutes to reach the cliff, and even longer to climb, but with Maxie bounding eagerly behind, they finally reached the plateau. There was no longer anyone else on top, but they could see Kenzie walking up the rounded bare hill beside them. "We can see the whole world from here," Nancy said in awe. All four stood looking out across paradise. They could see all the hills and the farmland and even down into the forest. They could see clearly to the other side where Rosa, Tina, and Vinitha were exploring the hill near the tunnel entrance, beside the orchards and farmland. "I can even see the swimmers in the bay," Amy called out. "They haven't gone far," Santa observed. "Everyone is still close to shore." "Just to let you know," Charlie wisely informed Amy, "it's not a bay. Uncle Louis says it's a lake." "Oh," Amy replied, looking disappointed. "But lake doesn't rhyme." "Swimming looks hard," Nancy said. "I don't think I want to learn." "We all have to learn," Charlie reminded her. "Swimming is going to be our first school lesson tomorrow." Nancy made a face. Looking in the opposite direction, she was excited to see a large rectangular building. "Look, there's a store that Uncle Louis told us about." The store sat down in a valley beside a train track. As he turned to look, a sharp whistle made them all jump. The train was coming in. "Did the train make that noise?" Amy asked. "Of course," Charlie replied. Nancy clapped her hands together eagerly. "I wonder what's on it," she called out. "Let's go see," Santa cheered. Picking Maxie up in his arms, Charlie ran down the hill with the girls. Built out of wooden building boards and hot glue, the store was fairly long. It had a slanted roof that covered the large deck all around. They couldn't get inside as the doors were locked. A sign on the window said, "Storekeepers needed." The children looked inside the window. There were many shelves full of items. There were lengthy wooden planks and plenty of toothpicks and blue tack, just like they had used in the nursery to make forts. Charlie pointed out the wooden box filled with fruits and vegetables, just like they had seen in the picture books. "Oh, I would love to be the storekeeper," Nancy exclaimed. "Really?" Amy asked, looking up at her friend in surprise. Amy did not want to be stuck inside a building every day. Yet eyeing her friend thoughtfully, she recalled that Nancy loved to organize things. Tall and sturdy, with her long brown hair tied back in a tight braid, Nancy wore a plain white dress devoid of ribbons. "I think you'll make a very good storekeeper," Amy said. Charlie and Santa agreed. Quite certain that she would, Nancy clapped her hands together. "Yes," she agreed. "It would be so fun to keep it all tidy and hand stuff out to everyone." "Let's look inside the train," Charlie suggested. The girls looked at him uneasily. "Should we?" Amy asked. "Why not?" Charlie replied. The train doors slid open easily. Inside were all the little beds from the nursery piled high with everyone's belongings. "Where are we all going to sleep tonight?" Charlie asked suddenly, his blue eyes full of concern. The girls looked at him blankly. They hadn't given this any thought. "Maybe we should find a place," Nancy suggested. "Then we can set up everyone's beds and have them ready." "Good idea," Charlie agreed. They looked around for a cozy place. "How about in the meadow?" Charlie said. "Oh, yes," Santa agreed. "But the cow might step on us," Amy objected. "Down by the lake might be nice." It's too far to carry everything," Charlie argued. "The store has a big flat part all around it," Nancy observed. "That's a deck," Charlie said. Amy looked at the deck and the roof that stretched over it. Having been used to sleeping in a cozy rectangular room, this seemed like a good substitution. "Yes," she nodded. "I think this is the best place to put the beds. Then we can all be together." The others agreed and began pulling out the wooden box beds, helping each other to carry them one by one. They set up a girls' section on one side of the deck and a boys' section on the other. Uncle Louie's bed was positioned right in the middle. They were really hungry when they had finished the job. "How do we get food?" Amy wondered. Thankfully, Uncle Louie arrived, wet and bedraggled, with 4 waterlogged boys in tow, wearing only their knee-length pants. Zahir and his friends were following a short distance behind, and Zahir had the golden-haired puppy in his arms. "Well done," Uncle Louie praised, seeing all the beds laid out. "This will be a good place to sleep tonight." With a pleased expression, he looked at the 3 children who had set up the sleeping quarters. "Thank you for organizing us all," he said. "Eventually, we'll start building homes, so we will each have our own shelters." "We get to build homes?" Charlie repeated. "Anywhere we want?" "Of course," Uncle Louie replied. "This is your world. Everyone gets to make a home where they would like to live." All the Tawnies looked up, some with alarm and others with excitement. "Can't we all stay together?" Amy asked, twisting her hands nervously. Santa pleaded. "Can we live with you, Uncle Louie?" "Can I too?" Zahir begged. Georgia, Lily, Rosa, Vahid, and Milan all wanted the same. Uncle Louie smiled kindly, seeing the wild-eyed children. Close by Zahir, he tousled his dark curly hair. "You will all be very safe here in paradise," he assured them. "But if you want to build a big house and live together, that is fine by me. Although," he paused, looking around awkwardly, "for now girls will live with girls and boys with boys." No one protested this arrangement. Amy and Santa clasped hands. "We're together," Santa said, "and we get Uncle Louie." Uncle Louie smiled, but he didn't commit. Georgia dashed over to cling on to Amy's arm. "Me too," she declared. "I want to be in the meadow," Charlie said without hesitation. His puppy barked and he laughed, "And so does Maxie." Vahid and Kenzie chose to be with Charlie. Yuyan, Rosa, and Vanitha linked arms. Tina ran over to them. "Beach for me," Damien and Lima called out in unison, and then they looked at each other and laughed. "I'll take the highest hill," Ponzi announced. "But I want it," Odin shouted, his pale blue eyes suddenly intense. "I said it first." Odin pushed Ponzi, and Ponzi tried to push back. Odin was bigger and heavy-boned, while Ponzi was lean and very wiry. As they began a shoving match, Uncle Louis strode over and pulled them apart. "Boys, cut it out," Uncle Louis said sternly. "This is a big world. There's room for everyone. You can both have a house on the hill. You're friends, remember?" The two boys glared at each other. "I get the flat side," Ponzi whispered. Odin was about to argue when Amy's stomach growled loudly. Everyone laughed. "How do we get food?" Amy asked politely. "I am so hungry." Everyone began complaining about how hungry they were. Uncle Louis held up his hands. "Calm down, everyone," he said. "There will always be food available. You saw the fruit on the trees, and the professor has never let us down." Reaching into his pocket for a key, Uncle Louis unlocked the door. "For now, we are able to help ourselves to food in here. But once we get storekeepers—" "Oh, I want to be a storekeeper," Nancy piped up. "Great," Uncle Louis replied with a smile. "We'll let you try it out and see if you like it. And once we have everything sorted, we'll trade for food." "What does that mean?" Ponzi asked. "You will all need to bring something to the store to trade for meals and whatever you need," Uncle Louis clarified. "Like what?" Damien asked, shaking back his wet, straggly blonde hair. "What would we bring?" "Well, if you want to live by the water," Uncle Louis replied, "then you might like to catch some fish and bring them to be cooked for breakfast, or to trade for fruits or vegetables." "I want to grow vegetables," Charlie smiled proudly. "So maybe I'll trade my vegetables for breakfast fish?" "Exactly," Uncle Louis replied, leading them all into the store. "Or someone could pick some flowers or make some furniture. There's even a little bakery here in the store, and somebody might like to learn how to make bread. We will all find something that we can do well and use that to trade." "What will you bring?" Ponzi asked Uncle Louis. "My work is to look after all of you and teach you school lessons," Uncle Louis chuckled. "So I will trade work for food." "Oh, this looks fun," Amy called out, walking around the kitchen. It was a square room with gleaming metal shelves and counters equipped with bowls and spoons, bags that said flour, and several other supplies. A large metal sink sat in front of a big window that looked out toward the treeless hill. The sink had taps, and Amy ran over to see if water would come out. It did. The taps worked just like they had in the nursery. A tall metal box was positioned against a wall. It had a big door that opened and several black knobs. On top were 4 round black spirals. "That is the oven," Uncle Louis told her. "We will be able to bake our bread in there." "What does bread taste like?" "I'm not sure," Uncle Louis laughed, "but I've heard it's something we will want to eat every day." Then Ponzi saw the Wonder Drink machine behind the store counter and bounded over. "Hey, Wonder Drink is here!" "Yes, for a little while longer you can all have Wonder Drink," Uncle Louis said, quickly walking over to stand in front of the machine before Ponzi could help himself. "But first, everyone needs to try at least one delicious vegetable or fruit." Suddenly he remembered something important. "Actually, now that we are in the real world, we must always wash our hands before we eat." "Why?" Ponzi asked. "Because we may have touched something like dirt or harmful bacteria that can make us sick if it gets into our mouths. You don't want to get sick. You'll feel awful. So go wash your hands with soap and water. Use the sink here or the one by the outhouse." There was a mad dash to the kitchen sink. The outhouse was much further away. Everyone washed, although some did it more carefully than others. When Amy's hands were clean, she picked up a carrot and bit into it. "Ooh, it's so crunchy and sweet," she said. All the other kids chose from the wooden box, and almost everyone chose more than one delicious treat before running over to get their cup of Wonder Drink. Fahid couldn't get enough carrots. Having filled up with nourishment, the children ran outside to continue their exploration and pick the best spot for their future home. Soon the remaining stragglers heard that food was to be found in the store, and they came running in to get lunch. Amy, Georgia, and Santa found the outhouse, which was another wooden building tucked in at the base of a forested hill. There was a girls' side which said "girls" very clearly, and a boys' side that said "boys." Just like in the nursery, each side had a couple of small private rooms with a round hole and a smooth plank. The holes went way, way down. Opening all the doors on the girls' side curiously, Amy found the third door open to a shower. She turned the taps and found it worked just like the one in the nursery. Drenched, she came out, told her friends, and then, of course, they too had to try it. Outside the outhouse, attached to the wall, was a large metal sink with running water and soap. After using the new outhouse and washing their hands, the girls explored paradise for the rest of the afternoon. It was so exciting to dip their toes in the lake, to feel the sand, climb the trees, pick the flowers, and stand up high on top of the hills. As the three girls tromped through the orchards, eating apples and talking about where they might live, Amy confessed,
I hope Uncle Louis decides to live with us.
Let's build a really big house with a room just for him. Xana and Georgia agreed. I'm glad we're all sleeping on the deck tonight, Xana added. I hope it takes a long time to build houses. Georgia was glad as well, but she was also intrigued about living together. When we do build a house, she prodded, where do you want to build it? How about in the meadow with the beautiful gardens all around us, Xana suggested, waving her arms toward the farmland. I was thinking the hill might be nice, Georgia said slowly. Not Odin and Ponsi's hill, but a smaller one. Yes, a hill, Amy nodded. Then we can wake up in the morning and look across a sparkling lake. Georgia laughed. And see what is going on all across paradise, she added. Which hill? Xana asked. Amy stood still and looked toward the hills. The tallest hill in the middle had already been claimed by Odin and Ponsi. There was a hill on either side of the rocky cliff. One was grassy and rounded, but without trees. The other was forested and close to the lake. It wasn't hard to choose. Let's try the hill with the forest, she suggested. When they climbed to the top, Lily and Dia were already sitting on the grass admiring the view. Do you want to live with us in one great big house? Georgia asked. Sure, Lily replied. Only if I get a room of my own, Dia insisted. Of course, Georgia agreed, her green eyes glowing with the idea. We'll all have our own rooms, but we'll also be together. The girls ran around on top of the hill looking for the best place to build. They considered several spots. Near the edge of the hill on the large clearing, on the side of the hill in the trees, or right on top and far from the edge, or on the other side which looked out towards the store. Eventually, they settled on the very top, far from the edge. We will have a great view of the lake and the pretty gardens, Amy raved. This is exactly where I want to live. Hey, look, there's Zahir and Milan, Georgia pointed out. I think they are picking a spot near us. Amy looked out in the direction Georgia was pointing. The boys were standing in the trees not far away. She saw Zahir's puppy, Fredo, looking up at her, wagging his tail. I guess they want to be cozy in the forest, she surmised. How nice. They will be our closest neighbors. They'll have almost the same view of the lake, Lily observed. By the time everyone returned to the store to get their wonder drink that evening, they all had ideas of where they wanted to live. Most planned to live in groups of 2 or more, and everyone was happy with their choices except for Odin and Ponsi. They were still arguing about who would get the flat part of the cliff.
You should build a house together like the rest of us, Zahir remarked to Ponsi.
Odin stamped his foot. No way! Ponsi shrugged. I'm not sharing a house with him. He snores. Uncle Louis made a suggestion. If you both want the flat part and you don't think you can share a house, then we will set up a contest to win it. Why not see who can pin the other to the ground for the longest, Odin said, folding his arms across his chest. That's a good contest. It's not exactly a fair contest, Uncle Louis smiled. Come up with a fair suggestion that won't hurt anyone and I'll consider it. After a dinner of wonder drink, the sky began turning the most fantastic pink and purple colors. Most of the other tinies were tired out and snuggling into their small beds, but not Amy. She had enjoyed her day so much that she longed to express her happiness. As she climbed the hill that she and the girls had chosen, she kept looking up at the sky in awe and occasionally stumbling over little stones and plants she didn't see. Uncle Louis had showed them a sunset in a book, but the colors she saw above surpassed her expectations. However, she hadn't expected the black crisscross pattern. In the book, the sky had been an uninterrupted expanse, and Amy didn't know that she was inside a house of glass. Oh, I wish I could thank Evan and the professor, she whispered as the pink became even more intense. She wondered if Evan might be looking into the nursery windows, and for a moment she imagined herself running back down the tunnel to thank him. But she knew the tunnel doors were closed tight. Will I ever see Evan again? She asked herself wistfully. I should have asked him that question yesterday.
Looking up again at the glowing crisscross sky, she walked right into a tree branch. Undeterred, she pushed it away. What does the professor look like? She thought. Will I ever meet him? He's the mastermind of paradise, she marveled. In her mind, she could picture Evan well, but the professor was just a blank spot with a very important label. He Must be so incredibly amazing to make this beautiful world. I would love to meet him. She sighed and asked herself, how do I thank them?
When she reached the top of the hill and stood where her house was going to be, the colors faded and the sky turned a deep blue. To her amazement, little white lights flickered on and off all around her. "Fireflies," she said in awe. "They are real." Down below in the lake, the loons cried out. Their stirring cry made her thankfulness overflow. "Oh, if only I could give Evan a hug," she thought wistfully, her hands folded together over her heart. "I want to tell him I love paradise." A little tune began blossoming inside. Standing on the hill in her blue sundress, Amy hummed and twirled, enjoying the way the ribbons floated and wrapped around her. Then she began adding words to the tune.
I just want to say thank you for today and every special way you have made the bay and places for us to play. I love you all away.
Once again, the song came together really well until the last line. She wanted to end with, "Thank you for the world," but see, here is right, she considered. The last line needs to rhyme with all the others. Up on the hill, as the light faded, and she could see the large luminous moon appearing in the sky, Amy tried over and over to get the last line right. Finally, she decided to sing,
Thank you for the world. Thank you, thank you, thank you for today.
It changed the rhythm a little, but she felt it expressed the deep gratitude that was in her heart. "I love you, Evan," she declared, holding her arms up to the sky. "And you too, Professor," she added wistfully, just in case they were listening. "And I just love, love, love this wonderful world you've made." Amy was unaware that the professor and Evan were sitting together on the other side of the frosted glass with tears in their eyes. Little Amy's song was the perfect ending to the delightful day they had spent watching the Tinies discover paradise. They had heard every comment and squeal of happiness through the microphone hidden under the school roof. The new world was as perfect as they had hoped, and neither one of them had anticipated such a grateful song.
Ooh la la. Not bad for a 10-month-old, the professor murmured gruffly to Evan. She has a lovely voice. Not bad at all, Evan whispered, taking another picture on his phone. It just makes everything we've done so worthwhile. What a sweetie. She is a special child, the professor smiled proudly. And while she is the only one who has actually said thank you, it's been so rewarding seeing all the delighted looks on everyone's face. I'm glad you took hundreds of pictures. Today was certainly worth every year of research and construction, Evan added softly as he scrolled through his photos. Even giving up your entire summer vacation? Best summer ever. Good. I'll see you in the halls tomorrow. Yes, you will, Evan replied quietly, rising from his chair and stretching his tall frame. So far, it looks like everything is working well, but I'll try to check on things in the morning. Louis can reach me if anything goes wrong, Professor Lemans reminded him in a hushed tone, pulling out his cell phone to look at his messages. Don't worry too much if you can't get in before your classes are over. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow, Evan smiled. He turned back for one last look into the dome. Little Amy was making her way down the hill in the moonlight to the small wooden beds on the deck. Good night, children, Evan whispered, knowing full well that they wouldn't and shouldn't hear him. Willie was happy to see them in paradise. He was sad he could no longer communicate with them directly. Have a nice sleep, everyone, he said softly. Checking the monitor to ensure there was no one around in the staff parking lot, Evan took the easy one-way exit. Accessible only to them, it was the quickest way out of the paradise room, bypassing all elevators, locked doors, and time-consuming key codes. Had there still been a number of people milling about the cars, he could have chosen to exit through the viewing hall, coming out the professor's private door. But at night, the one-way exit was the easiest. Chapter 7. A Hot Day. It was a hot day in southern Ontario. The week had been the hottest on record for September. In the biosphere, the giant air conditioning units were working overtime to keep up, especially in the Arctic Dome. The seals and the polar bears were spending most of their time in their aquariums, separated by a strong glass wall, as their artificially created snow had melted completely. On that first day of the semester, many of the university students were talking about the heat. "It's not much better in here than it is out there," one student complained, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It's 14 degrees better," the professor replied, having already checked the indoor and outdoor temperatures. "Then it must be 50 degrees out there," a female student estimated. "We should get another day off to go to the beach, just to survive." The professor chuckled. "No, it's only 37 degrees outside," he told her. "If it was 50, the university would be shut down and we would all be in danger of heat stroke and death." He then launched into his favorite side issue. "This is our world," he told the 200 students sitting in his class. "This is one of the life-threatening problems that you will need to address in the future. Our world is spinning out of control. The extremes of temperature are just one indicator of all that is going wrong with our planet. Due to excessive pollution, fossil fuel emissions, and irresponsible stewardship, we have brought many of these problems on ourselves. We need to do all we can to turn our world around, or future generations may not be able to survive." A red-haired student put up his hand. "Yes," Professor Lemans acknowledged. He didn't know everyone's name just yet. It was only the first day of Foundations in Molecular Biology and Genetics 101. "Isn't it God's world, sir?" the young man asked. A light sarcastic laugh escaped the professor and rippled across the classroom. "God's world?" the professor repeated, his dark eyebrows raised in a skeptical fashion. "Surely if there was a God, then he would be doing a much better job controlling the conditions of this planet. The environmental conditions of the last 20 years indicate to me there is absolutely no higher being watching over us. Or if there is," he mumbled to himself, "he doesn't care much about his creation." The arm of the redhead went up again. "Yes," nodded the professor. "But, sir, as you said, it's man's irresponsible stewardship that is to blame for many of the life-threatening problems that we face. And God has promised to intervene in the future to make things right." "Well, when he gets around to intervening, perhaps a few more will join his cause," the professor acknowledged. Seeing a number of hands go up, the professor decided to terminate the discussion. "I highly recommend my book on this subject," he said. "There are a few copies of Faith or Fact, An End to Delusion in the Rainforest Library, and plenty of other very helpful resources on this topic. Make good use of them. A good scientist doesn't ever allow bias to cloud his investigations. He explores all the evidence before making any conclusions." "I've read it," another student piped up proudly. "It's good. Scientists make decisions based on evidence, not faith," he scoffed. Just one second," Seth argued. "Faith is based on evidence." "Not according to my dictionary," the professor retorted. Having Googled the word faith, he read the definition. "A belief not based on proof." A female student put up her hand. "When I Google faith, Cambridge Dictionary says a high degree of trust or confidence in someone or something." Seth nodded. "The Bible defines faith as persuasion," he stated. "Faith is a well-grounded assurance of that for which we hope and a conviction of the reality of things which we do not see." "Ooh la la, I've never heard of that definition," the professor laughed. "Did you make it up?" "It's the Weymouth translation of Hebrews 11 verse 1, Seth smiled. "If you look up the actual meaning of the Greek words, it's even stronger." "Sir," Seth pleaded, "we all see and evaluate the same evidence. Some believe the evidence happened by chance, however improbable that may be, while others see the evidence as proof for an intelligent creator. There is a measure of faith required whether you believe in creation or evolution. Neither theory can be fully proven by scientific experiment, so both are better described as theories of history, not science." "Enough of this," the professor frowned. "We're all here today," he stated, "to take a look at the remarkable abilities of the cell to divide and reproduce." Continuing on without any further interruptions, the professor began the new university semester, sharing some of the remarkable discoveries and advances by researchers all over the world. He was teaching a very important foundational course, one that would lead many of his students on to various scientific careers. It was a long, hot, sweaty day that first day back, and the professor wasn't used to teaching full-time. In the last 4 years, he had taken a lighter load of classes to give himself more time to research and build paradise. Now that his new world was up and running, he had resumed a full teaching schedule. Evan was also very busy, hoping to finish his master's degree in 3 semesters. They met at 4 o'clock in the Reptile Cafe to check on the tinies. The professor was pleased to see that Bert was basking on a rock near the waterfall, while the turtles lazed in the water. Timbo had been shipped to the pet store. "How have you survived the day?" Evan asked as they walked along the mirrored hall. Howler monkeys and the noisy macaw called out to each other from their well-designed habitats. "I hear this heat wave will break tonight with a bank of thunderstorms moving in." "That's a relief," the professor sighed, wiping sweat from his forehead. Instinctively, he looked around to ensure they were alone in the hallway. "Did you get my message?" Evan asked, automatically doing the same check as he pulled out his cell phone to press the green arrow. Patting the pockets of his white lab coat, the professor suddenly realized his phone was missing. "No, I did not," he replied. "Maybe I left my phone in the paradise room this morning. Sure hope it's not at home." "Oh, routines," he sighed as they both positioned themselves on the drop square. "It takes a while to readjust." As soon as Evan pressed the green arrow app, the floor dropped away below their feet. Evan and the professor were lowered quickly down to the heavy metal door. "I have a question concerning the rate of mutation based on radiation damage," Evan said, as the professor typed in the code on his door. "I know there's a fine balance between the amount of DNA damage and repair versus the death of the cell. What have you found in your research?" The professor launched into a detailed reply as he and Evan walked through the empty nurseries and took the elevator up. They stepped into his private room, housing the newly functioning dome terrarium. "Whew, it's hot in here," Evan remarked. With a jolt, the professor noticed that paradise looked quite wilted inside. For a moment, he didn't see any of the children anywhere. In a panic, his eyes raced to the lake, and with relief, he saw many heads in the water with Louie. The animals were lying along the shallow shoreline. Racing to the side panel, he checked the conditions inside. The temperature displayed 45 degrees Celsius inside the dome. In the large glass paradise room, the temperature had climbed to 40. "Salors!" the professor called it fearfully. "This is not supposed to happen. Check the air conditioning unit." Without a word, Evan rushed to the computer desk and took a seat in the big padded chair. "Why didn't Louis message me that things were this bad?" the professor expressed anxiously, as he pressed the blue button on the wall to engage the rainmaker, and then the white button to do an immediate and complete air exchange. "Your phone, sir?" Evan reminded him, hastily entering the important password 0suffering66 to check the controls. "Right. Who would have thought there'd be an emergency on the very first day?" Evan began troubleshooting, searching the main computer control system. Little voices were coming through the microphone and over the speakers as the anxious professor ran over to view the lake. He wanted to ensure all the living creatures had made it to the water. Since they were in a group and he could only see heads, it was hard to discern who was talking. "It's so hot," a little voice said, which sounded like Yu Yan. "When can we get out of the water, Uncle Louie? Will it be hot like this every day?" "I want to go back to the nursery. I don't like the sun. I want it to go away. I don't want to do swimming lessons any longer." He was sure the voice was Amy's. "I'm hungry. When can we get food?" He was almost certain this came from Zahir. "Does the professor want us to be this hot?" The last question startled the professor as he counted all the heads bobbing above the surface. "Do I want them to be this hot?" he reiterated to himself in utter disbelief. He wasn't sure who asked the question, but he imagined it was Ponzi or Odin, or maybe even Franz. In his mind, he thought, "They have no idea how hard I've worked to ensure that paradise is perfect." "Yeah," Odin added. "Are you sure he knows what's going on? Or is he doing this on purpose?" Inside paradise, sitting in the lake with all the children, Louis responded quickly. "Definitely not on purpose. Professor loves us. Let's be thankful that he gave us all this water to keep cool." Santa's voice piped up. "And we should be thankful to Lima and Franz for telling us to come in here."
Yes, Uncle Louis acknowledged gratefully. This was an excellent idea, boys. This is the place to be on a hot day. It's always the place to be, someone cried out. Swallowing hard, the professor counted the animals he could see lying along the shallow shoreline. He was furious with himself for not inspecting his controls on his lunch break. He had been so confident that everything was working as it should. He hated to see any kind of suffering in his beautiful world, and if even one of the tinies had died as a result of this malfunction, he knew he'd be totally devastated. Anxiously, he also considered that if the public ever found out about this system failure and the length of time he had taken to respond, his hopes of continuing on as the guardian of paradise could be dashed. Having determined that all of the living creatures had found their way to the cooling water, Jax Lemans hurried over to see if Evan had found a glitch in the program. On top of all his worries and concerns, his heart ached that some of the tinies were questioning his motives. How could any of them think that I wanted this to happen? He asked Evan quietly. There are only a couple that do, Evan assured him, his eyes scrutinizing the data scrolling by on the main computer screen. They are just kids. They have no idea how much intensive research and effort has gone into making their world absolutely perfect. Louis's patient voice was still responding to the children's complaints. Just a little longer till things cool down. When it starts to get dark, it will cool down for sure. Then we'll all go and see what we can make for dinner. Tell me what you're hoping for. I think I found the problem, Evan called out. There was an error message on the heat transfer unit. I'll try a reset. Merci beaucoup, Jax exclaimed with a sigh of relief, as the raindrops slowly crept over the hills in the north and the air exchanger knocked the temperature down 1 whole degree. He noticed the edge of his phone under a research paper. Picking it up, he saw there were 5 messages from Louis, all warning of the intense heat and asking for help. Poor Louis. I must have really let him down today, the professor mused quietly, walking over to the dome to look in. The reset worked, Evan whispered loudly. Likely it was a system overload, he replied softly. I guess we'll need to keep a better eye on the controls should we reach extreme temperatures again. Let's sync my phone to the controls as well as yours, Evan suggested, keeping his voice low. We should have done this from the beginning. Jax Lemans didn't disagree. It was a completely unfortunate oversight. As Evan worked on syncing his phone, the Rainmaker reached the lake. It was the first time the children had seen rain. The wonder of little drops of water falling across the lake and landing on their heads quickly distracted them from the heat. They tried to catch it. They tilted their heads back to feel it fall into their mouths. They laughed and held up their hands. And Georgia was the first one to spot a rainbow. Look in the sky, she shouted. Those are the most beautiful colors, and it's right over our hill, girls. It's a rainbow, Uncle Louis told them. The sunlight is refracting through the water droplets in the air. Let's go find it, Zahir shouted, charging out of the lake, his dark, wet curls bouncing against his drenched shirt and spraying water in all directions. Frito, his golden-haired dog, bounded after him. Vahid and Milan followed close behind. With that, most of the children raced toward the beach in search of the elusive bow. Louis let them run, knowing the professor was now responding to the emergency. Already, he could feel the cooler air coming in. The rain collected on the plateau and began cascading down the rock cliff. Evan and the professor chuckled as the awestruck children marveled at the stream of water falling down the rock face. They watched them sprint along the riverbed, following the gurgling brook racing toward the lake. The dreadful heat was soon forgotten as the plants began to revive and the beauty of rain refreshed the new world. Look, Santa called out to Charlie, with her hands around some nodding pansies. The flowers are bright and cheerful again. They look so beautiful when they're happy. Children love the rain, Evan observed, watching Amy, Zahir, and Georgia prance around in the waterfall as it cascaded down the rocky cliff. Maybe we should program the Rainmaker to come on once a week during the day. It'll just be an inconvenience, the professor replied, shaking his head. Any towels or laundry they've hung out to dry will get wet. Once in a while rain might be fun, but I'd rather leave it set for the night hours. While Evan didn't fully agree, he said no more. He didn't feel it was an important issue.
Chapter 8. Building Homes. The first glorious week in paradise was filled with morning sessions of school and learning how to swim, which was only going well for 3 of the boys. In more successful fashion, other tinies were learning how to bake bread, plant vegetables, feed the animals and birds, and most were looking forward to building houses in the afternoon. The tinies liked the idea that they could choose where they wanted to live and what kind of house they wanted to build, even though some found it distressing to think of sleeping far away from Uncle Louis. Little by little, he was assuring them that they would be perfectly safe and that it would be fun to live with their friends. So far, all of the children remained unaware that at night Uncle Louis would wait till they were all asleep in their wooden beds on the store deck, and then he would silently slip off to the hidden cave. The cave was concealed in the hill nearest to the lake, which had been aptly named by the girls Rainbow Hill. The first time the children had seen the rainbow, it did seem to be attached to the slopes. This night, as always, when Uncle Louis was certain they were all asleep, he slipped away from the store deck. He was thankful for a little moonlight that helped him find his way in the dark, past the outhouses, and into the narrow valley between Rainbow Hill and the tall cliff next to it. About 50 more strides took him to the secret entrance. Hidden behind 2 fast-growing spruce trees was what appeared to be a very heavy and large rock. However, Louis knew that this fake rock could be easily rolled to the side, revealing a locked door. There was only one key to this door, and Louis kept it safely with him at all times. Another key opened the store, and that key had been given to Nancy. Inside the cave, the office room was powered by electricity. There were only 2 places in the giant terrarium where electricity was available, here in Louis's office and in the store. Inside the small cave office, a smartphone was attached to the wall. The phone was taller than Louis. Ever since Louis had been old enough to figure things out, the professor had given him access to a phone. It was through sites like Google and YouTube that Louis had received most of his education. Every day, the professor had assigned Louis videos to watch, beginning with the alphabet all the way up to simple math and reading. It was a system which had worked well for the first tiny, given that he was a diligent, studious individual who wanted to learn. In the private room attached to the nursery where Louis had lived for 4 years on his own, the smartphone had been an important access to learning and mental stimulation when the professor was busy with other matters. However, the professor wanted a different experience for the tinies in paradise. He had seen many university students who couldn't live without technology and spent a great deal of time with a digital device in their hands. The professor wanted the tinies to learn by experimentation and to enjoy the elaborate world that he had created. After all, he had texted Louis, there's no point to going to all the trouble of creating such a remarkable environment with so much to discover and invent if the tinies are going to spend all their time staring at a screen. Therefore, the smartphone is to remain a top-secret instrument for your use alone. It was here, in this cave office, that Louis escaped at night to communicate with the professor and research ideas on the internet. Right now, he and the children needed to learn how to build homes, and he was thankful for the YouTube videos demonstrating the construction of simple and elaborate homes using building boards and glue guns. Most of the children were eager to build their own homes, and so Louis had put all the children's names into a big jar. He told them that whichever name he drew out each week would be the one whose house they would build as a group. Uncle Louis knew it would take a team effort to build each home, and he thought it would be more fun to construct the houses together. Just after dinner that night, they had picked out the first name, and it was Santa's. "I want to live with Georgia, Amy, Lily, and Dia," Santa had proclaimed, clapping her hands and doing her dance. "Are you all happy to live together?" Uncle Louis had asked, looking at each one. "Yes, but we will need a really big house so that we can each have our own room," Dia had insisted in queenly fashion. So Louis was looking for plans for a mansion made with popsicle sticks, or as the tinies called them, wooden building boards. There were several ideas on the internet. He settled on an attractive design with a blue roof. It had sufficient rooms for all the girls, with little decks and a lovely fence that went all around the property. He watched the video and then copied the link, sending it off in an email to the professor. "Please give us a printout of these instructions and a picture of the house," he texted. "Another carton of popsicle sticks and glue sticks will come in handy as well. A lot of materials will be required for this mansion." "I'll send them in tomorrow morning on the train," the professor replied immediately. After he had given the professor the daily briefing and they had chatted about what the tinies were learning well and what they were not, The professor gave him a few more tips on how to swim. It had all sounded simple enough to Louis until he had tried in the lake. They said good night, and then Louis left the office cave, locking the door behind him and rolling the rock facade back into place. Still not tired, he walked to the clearing at the top of the hill, only a stone's throw from the area the girls had marked out for their mansion. He was pleased the girls would be the closest inhabitants to the control cave. He knew they were very unlikely to spy on him or snoop around at night. Had Odin and Ponzi chosen the same location, he knew he would be concerned. Sitting down, Louis looked up at the night sky, full of stars. The black crisscross lines weren't as noticeable when the sky was dark, and everything above had a more uniform appearance. Down below, a fingernail moon illuminated a shiny path across the peaceful water. There were never any waves at night. The waves came only after lunch and lasted until dinner time. A few ducks bobbed up and down as they floated across a silvery reflection. Little birds twittered good night to one another, and the cry of the loons echoed across the lake. 3 boys, Damien, Lima, and Franz, lay stretched out on the sand, fast asleep. They had claimed the beach for their home, but were uninterested in building a house. Unfortunately, Louis thought to himself, the Beach Boys aren't willing to help anyone else build either. And they sure don't like the bartering system. I think those 3 would be quite content to remain on Wonder Drink and sleep on the beach for the rest of their lives. However, he pondered with a smile on his face, they may be the first to invent a flotation device. In the last few days, the Beach Boys have been trying out different free products from the store and discovering various ways to use them. When the houses were done, Louis planned to give them the pattern for a boat. For now, they were learning a lot from their own experimentation. Louis gazed across the meadow where the new veggie garden was thriving with tiny tomatoes, carrots, cucumbers, peppers, squash, onions, and potato plants. The 7 children who helped plant the garden had each taken one area to maintain. Some things required extra watering by hand, and often grass tried to grow where it wasn't wanted. Having been inspired by some of the garden designs that Professor Lemans had sent in on the train, Santa, Yuyan, and Venitha made trellises for the tomatoes to climb on, and were putting up a stone fence to keep out the rabbits and sheep. Maxie was their loyal companion, and did her best to keep the small garden predators away. There was plenty of food in other places for the rodents and birds to eat. Charlie, Vahid, and Kenzie had been the first to claim the farmland and were making plans for a house right across from the garden, next to the tunnel entrance. Just over from the gardens, partway up Mining Hill, the other 4 girls had chosen to build a house in the orchard. Tina, Venitha, Yuyan, and Rose's house would be in a quiet area which looked out toward the lake, surrounded by peach and cherry trees. Getting to his feet to walk down the hill, Louis glanced up at the rock cliff. Kenzie had coined the name Cascading Mountain after seeing the waterfall. The majority had liked the name. Unfortunately, Ponzi and Odin had been unable to find a way to share the mountain plateau. They had decided instead to compete in a race to scale the cliffside, with the winner earning the property. Having agreed to compete, the lean, wiry Ponzi had won, and Big Odin was still brooding. He didn't feel it was a fair competition, and Louis felt badly. The wrestling contest would have favored Odin. Paradise was supposed to be a world of complete happiness and fairness for everyone. Louis wondered if there might have been a better way to settle the matter. Reaching the store deck, Louis lay down in the blanket he had spread on the soft grass. He heard one of the boys stir. "Where are you?" Ponzi asked, one dark eye peering out from under his mass of tangled black hair. "Just up on Rainbow Hill looking at the moon," Louis answered. Ponzi looked up at the sky. "That's nice," he said, and then he fell back to sleep. Wide awake, Louis determined someone needed to cut the boys' hair, since they didn't look after it the way the girls did. He had one very small sharp knife that he used for himself, but he knew it would be painfully slow to cut all the boys' hair in the same fashion. Then he started wondering where it would be best to build his own house once the children's homes were finished. He wanted to be somewhere central, somewhere they could easily find him. Besides, all the best scenic views had already been taken. Right here by the store might be ideal, he thought sleepily. Nancy had already taken the one spare room in the store and was doing a great job of organizing everything and everyone that came to trade. Often the quiet and reliable Milan joined her. They had opposite personalities, but seemed to work well together. It's all going as planned, he thought before falling asleep. There's something for everyone to do, and everyone is happy, except maybe Odin. Chapter 9. The Half-Price Sale. Alone at a table for 4 in one of the local French restaurants, the professor finished his crêpière Suzette, savoring every last delightful caramel-coated apple slice folded into the delicious dessert. He didn't eat out very often, but today was his birthday, and hardly anyone knew. Years and years ago, he and his wife would have gone out for dinner and talked about the places they wanted to visit and the big plans they had to adopt a multicultural family. But that was before the accident. Licking the last bit of caramel off his spoon, the professor sadly pondered the fact that he had just turned 55. 10 more years to retirement, or maybe 15 if I'm still up for it, he thought. What have I got to show for my life? No family, not many friends, just a devoted student and a whole world of tinies who don't know my birthday or really anything else about me. As much as the professor told himself that paradise was primarily a scientific experiment, he had always dreamed of having a big family. Wendy and he had hoped to have a couple of their own and adopt a few from third world countries. However, many years of building careers, several miscarriages, and finally the accident had shattered all his hopes. Professor Lemans did have some relatives. His favorite aunt had sent a card right on time, like she always did. He had a few cousins in France and one in Quebec who had Facebooked him with a bon anniversaire post that morning. However, his own beloved parents had died in a tragic car accident 15 years earlier, leaving him the enormous inheritance earmarked for scientific development. A cricket chirp sounded, and the professor checked his phone. There was a text message from his in-laws in Newfoundland. "Happy birthday, Jax! It's so sad that you're having your 55th birthday all alone. When you're all done this big project, we'd like to take you on a week-long vacation anywhere you'd like to go and make up for the last 5 years of busyness. We could even travel somewhere here in Canada, maybe the Rockies or here in the East if you'd like. Please let us know if you ever have a holiday you can share with us. With plenty of loving thoughts, Bill and Mandy." There was no doubt that Professor Lemans was feeling just a little glum as he paid the waiter and left a generous tip. "I've spent all my time and resources developing paradise," he sighed. "I hardly have any friends left, and I never take holidays." He passed a toy store where he had often purchased clothes and Barbie accessories for the tinies. With a passing glance at the display window, he noticed that the 70% discount sign on fairy petal clothing and accessories was no longer hanging behind the glass. "Bought it all 2 weeks ago," he chuckled. A little further downtown was a high-end garden shop with plenty of fall flowers and trees. On the sidewalk sat a bright orange sign which caught his eye. "Half price on fairy furniture," he read. "Ooh la la! I'll just have to check this out," he smiled, stroking his grey goatee. Building little fairy gardens had been the summer fad in Greenville, and now it seemed that all the supplies were on sale. Inside the Blue Moon Garden Center, which was always open late on a Friday evening, a large fairy furniture sign hung over a high wooden shelving unit. The professor picked up the tiny painted metal chairs and tables, beds and stools, and his dark eyes lit up. "The tinies will be so excited to see all this useful and well-made furniture," he thought to himself. "It's much better than anything they can make with wooden building boards." Walking inside the store, he told the cashier that he wanted to buy it all. "Certainly," she said, dumbfounded. It took quite a while to ring through all the individual pieces. "If you don't mind me asking," she said politely, "what do you plan to do with all this?" "It's just so charmant, lovely," the professor told her. "I'm going to put these pieces in one of the biosphere displays. You might even get to see it one day." "Oh, I love the biosphere," she exclaimed. "Do you work there?" "Yes, I'm one of the professors," he replied. She looked at his face more carefully. He wasn't wearing a black suit or a white lab coat. "Oh, "You must be Professor Lemans," she stated in surprise. He nodded. "Then you are the most important professor," she exclaimed with a laugh. "I'll certainly look for the furniture. I visit almost every holiday with my family. We especially love walking around the rainforest at Christmas time. It's like taking a trip to the tropics." Smiling, Professor Lemans nodded. "Yes, my favorite too," he agreed. The cashier didn't ask any more questions. "Have fun," she smiled, putting the receipt in one of his bags. The professor walked out of the store with a large bag of gifts for his tinies, happier than he had been all day long. Instead of going home, he returned to the biosphere. There in the supply room, he loaded the train with as much as it could carry, which was only a quarter of the furniture he had purchased. Running down the supply room corridor and through the elevator entrances, Professor Lemans entered his private room, the Paradise Room. It was dark, but a little moonlight streamed through the clear glass above. He didn't turn on a light as he didn't want the glow to shine through the frosted glass around the sides and frighten the tinies. Instead, he walked over to the dome and looked inside. Louis was sitting on Rainbow Hill gazing towards the lake as he often did in the evenings. Damien, Lima, and Franz were asleep on the beach. All the other children were snuggled inside their beds on the store deck. The wonderful world looks so inviting. "I wish I could climb the hill and talk to Louis right now," the professor mused. "I'd like to tell him about the fairy furniture I bought, and I'd love to sit there beside him and ask how swimming went today and what the children learned. How I would love to live in Louis's world." Had the oldest tiny been in his cave office, the professor could have sent him a text that he wanted to talk. But there was no way to communicate outside the dome without the risk of the tinies discovering that they were being watched. One day he would tell them that they could be seen, but not until he was ready to put Paradise on display. Hoping that Louis might check his messages one more time before going to bed, the professor texted, "I found a good sale on furniture today. I'll be sending it in on the train early tomorrow morning. This first shipment is a gift for everyone. Please help to divide it up fairly. I'll be sending in 3 more shipments for the store with the usual trade system in place. Don't feel they need to trade too much for it. I want everyone to get the furniture they need." After sending the text, the professor went home to his quiet little condominium overlooking the river. There were no presents waiting for him, and no one had made him a cake. But his excitement over the gifts of fairy furniture made it difficult to get to sleep. As soon as the day began to dawn, Professor Lemans hurried back down to the biosphere. This was going to be the earliest train delivery yet, and he couldn't wait to see the joy on the children's faces. Chapter 10. The Gifts. In the supply room, the professor set the train in motion, and then he raced through the secret entrances to watch the delivery take place in the dome. All the tinies were still asleep when the train whistle blew. Some of them startled in fright. Others raised their heads wearily with confusion. Louis was the first one up. As soon as they caught sight of the train coming in, the children rolled out of bed and raced down to the track to see what it was bringing in. Uncle Louis had received the text the night before and knew what was happening. He took charge. "All right, children, we have been sent a wonderful gift from the professor. This is furniture for your houses." There were squeals of delight, especially from the girls. Some of the kids started pushing forward to get to the train first. Those already in front began pushing the others back, and a fight nearly broke out. Uncle Louis stopped them. "We're going to do this fairly for everyone," he began patiently. "First, we're going to bring all the furniture out and set it up on a line on the grass. Then we will decide who gets to pick. Does everyone understand?" Mumbled agreement was reluctantly given. Opening the doors to the train, Louis let the children bring out the furniture. Piece by piece, it was brought out and set in place on the grass. A large metal, wicker-like couch with pink and white cushions was a favorite. 2 of the tinies carried out the couch, and all of the girls hoped to claim it as their own. A blue checkered hammock attracted the attention of the Beach Boys. When Uncle Louis explained how it was used, all 3 wanted it. Unfortunately, the hammock was the only item that Lima, Franz, and Damien bothered to retrieve. Everyone else continued unloading the furniture until it was out of the train. The very last piece was a white, sculpted double bed, which was carried out by Zahir and Milan. There was an uproar over the bed. Uncle Louis wondered how to divide the gifts up fairly. Everyone had been helpful, except, of course, the Beach Boys, but they had helped a little. They had carried one piece out. "Okay, everyone stand in a line," Uncle Louis said, motioning to the grass beside him. "Now, first of all, there is no need to panic. I want you to know the professor will be sending in 3 more train loads of furniture for trade. Eventually, there will be enough beds and chairs for everyone. Not only that, but if there are items you really like, we can try to make them from building boards." His words had a calming effect on the children. "Almost everyone was helpful," he began, "so any suggestions on how to make it fair?" Kenzie spoke up. "Let's put all the names in a jar, just like we did for the houses," he said. It wasn't an original idea, but everyone was in agreement. With her long blonde hair streaming behind her, Georgia ran off to get a pen and paper from inside the store. Kenzie found a jar. Together they worked to write all the names down, while the others craned their necks to inspect all the choices again without getting out of line. Franz's name was chosen first, most undeservedly, and to no one's surprise, he picked the hammock. Then Santa was next, and she chose the big white bed, which would come in handy for the 5 girls living in the mansion. "We can all fit in this," she exclaimed cheerfully to her future housemates. Georgia, Amy, and Lily nodded dubiously. Dia shook her head and reminded Santa that she needed a room of her own. The professor, watching silently and unseen from the other side of the dome, heard when Amy's name was called out and saw that she chose the pink and white couch. Gleefully, she danced around it. She was so thrilled. It made the professor very happy to see the tinies react with joy to his gifts. One by one, the children were called as their names were drawn from the jar, and they had their opportunity to choose a piece of furniture. Some of the children began hauling off their piece to the site they had chosen for their home. Rosa, however, let everyone know she was unhappy, complaining that the only chair left was green. "And I don't like green," she wailed. "It's not fair. Won't someone trade with me?" But no one else wanted to trade, and all that was left was a desk. Rosa didn't want a desk. It was now obvious that when the professor had loaded the train, he had miscounted by 1. Standing on the other side of the dome, he shook his head in dismay. Someone was going to be disappointed. "This isn't supposed to happen in paradise," he rebuked himself. "How could I mess up counting to 21? Although they had already collected their piece of furniture, Amy, Nancy, and Milan were still standing nearby, wondering who was going to miss out. When the second last name was called, Vinitha strode forward to pick up the one white desk still standing on the grass. Quiet little Yu Yan bowed her dark head and began to cry. There was nothing left for her. For a moment, no one knew what to do. The professor sent a text to Louis, even though he knew he wouldn't get it until he entered the cave later on that night. "Sorry about the miscount on the furniture. I will send it another piece right away." Walking over to the wall, intending to press the train reverse button, he was surprised to hear Amy speak up. "It's okay, Yu Yan," she said. "You can have my couch. Uncle Louis said the professor will be sending in lots of other furniture. I can pick something the next time." Rushing back over to look through the dome, the professor saw Yu Yan dry her tears and gratefully accept the pretty couch. Vahid offered to help her carry it over to the orchard. A wonderful feeling came over the professor. It surpassed the joyful feeling he'd felt when Amy had danced around the couch. Her compassion and willingness to share evoked a deep measure of love in the professor's heart toward her. She was moved by Yu Yan's tears, he pondered. She saw her friend's pain and acted generously. "And she believes me," he smiled. "She trusts I'll send in more furniture." He blew her a kiss, only of course Amy had no idea what the professor had done or how he felt about her. Then he ran to the wall and pressed the train reverse button. With its whistle blowing, the train began backing up. The professor raced through the open elevator entrances and into the supply room. He looked through the fairy furniture for something special and was delighted to find another couch with pink and white cushions. Placing this on the train, he was ready to send it back in when he stopped himself. "If I send the train in right away," he considered, "then all the children will know they're being watched." As much as he longed to give Amy an immediate reward, he knew it was better to let her faith in him hold strong for another day. With a sigh, the professor loaded up the train with as much furniture as it could carry, so that it would be ready for the morning. He sent Louis another text. Please make sure that Amy has first dibs on the furniture when the next train comes in.